Hi folks. This week we're going to be covering how PHP works with the database. First thing we want to do is actually connect to our database. So when PHP connects, I want you to think of it as a phone connection. Basically, PHP is going to call the database, do what it needs to do, and then hang up the phone. So there are several ways to utilize this, and the first thing I'd like to show you is this article from week 9. I want you to read this. This is Pdo versus MySQL. Which should you use? Well, in our case, when we look at the differences of each one, this is what the text uses, MySQL. And I'm going to be using Pdo because I want to show you that there's very little difference, but I want you to have some familiarity with both. You'll see that it shouldn't be confusing at all because really it's about PHP initiating the queries that you write. So what you need to do is learn how to display data, how to update data, how to delete data, and how to insert data. It's just 4 steps. So to give you a nice well-rounded balance, the text will again use MySQL, and I'll be using Pdo. Professionally, I use Pdo for a couple of reasons. It's always object-oriented programming. It's like SQLi, it's easy. It has something called name parameters, which can protect against SQL injection. Both have object mapping. Pdo has something called prepared statements, which we'll get into. But both are great options. You may be just now learning the difference between object-oriented and procedural code. In object-oriented code, we can actually implement our functions that control the database a little bit easier than having to longhand code them out. So database support, the 12 different drivers here means it's very compatible with different servers and different types of databases. So overall, you can see that Pdo is a little better in this category, in this category, in this category as well. And that's why I want to make sure that you go ahead and use either one, but that you understand each. So let's take a look at the Pdo connection. When we connect to our database, we're going to be connecting using this line of PHP. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this. This is covered by the book, but you'll see there's 4 categories: your host, your database, your username, and password. So let's say I'm in MAMP. And I'm going to go into my database. Again, it's localhost phpMyAdmin. We haven't done it in a couple weeks. So just a refresher, when you go ahead and start your server, whether it be XAMPP or MAMP, you want to make sure that MySQL and Apache are both turned on. And one thing you may find is that there is an actual database called MySQL. And inside that database is a field called user. Now if I click browse, I see my host, I see my username, and then I see my password. So this is actually an encryption, and so it's not your actual password, it's our password encrypted. But I can tell you that the host is localhost and the user is root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the actual query straight from this article. Okay, and we're going to run a couple tests on this, okay? I'm going to call it, we'll call it just connection.php. And you should do the same thing if you want a seamless interaction with this week's content. So I'm going to save my connection.php, and I'm going to save it right in the htdocs folder where all our PHP files go, and I am going to go ahead and save it in there. And right now, if I go to that page, which is localhost 8888/connection.php, which is this, I get this fatal error. Now if you remember, you can go into your logs to see what that fatal error is. It gives you no information. But let's go back and review where our logs are. So in MAMP, it would be under logs and under the PHP error log. So I could just simply open this up. And it opens up in the console. Because it opens up the console, if I make continual errors, it'll continue to show me the the values. I could easily open this up in a text editor if I wanted. But right now, I get this. I get access denied for username at localhost, password yes in applications. That's the fatal error because I am not connected. But we do know that my name is localhost. So what is my database name? Well, let's go back to our browser. And in this case, my database name, let's pick one. I'll go to WebD 153 because that's where we've been doing most of our work throughout the screencast this semester. And here you see server localhost, database WebD 153. So I'm going to copy and paste that, and it's going to be equal to this right here. Okay? Now, if I write the name root, and to be honest with you, this is the password root for the database. And the reason I know that is because if you go to your dashboard, this MAMP dashboard, it'll tell you your password right here. See that root and root? That's why I know. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's username root, password root. And I'm just going to save it, okay? Now, when I go back to my connection.php, I get an empty set. Now this is exactly what we want. Okay, we want to know that we didn't have a single error message here. And in fact, I could simply do something like echo connect, like that. And if I see the word connect, then I know that we're in great shape because this worked seamlessly. Okay, so let's say I make a mistake again, I would hit refresh and I'd get the page is working error. So this right here is a very, very simple way to connect to our database. And as we get more experienced with PDO, we will have a little better understanding what's going on right now. But if you look here, this means brand new PDO object. And this value equals an instance of that entire object, which is basically a connection. So visually, I want you to think of it exactly you would a phone. We are connecting to this database right here on this host with this username and this password. Now, let's get a little more in depth. If you go to php.net and simply look at the PDO area, and you can find that just by entering PDO in the side here, you will see a connection. So it has a section on connections and connection management. So this is what we just did. Example 1, connecting to MySQL. This is also the block I want you to know. And this will be for when you get your own server and you start connecting normally. And what this is called a try catch. And what it'll do is it'll try to connect to the database, in this case WebD 153 with root. And I'll just paste what I know already works. And what should happen here is it's going to try these values. And right now I'm not, I can use this select statement. Right now it says select from foo. Well, let's go ahead and just select from stores. We were working with this when we were doing aggregate. So I'll say select all from stores. It's a smaller database. And we're going to basically connect, and for each one of these print R, and then nullify the connection after we've gotten what we wanted. And if that doesn't happen, we can catch an exception and actually see the message, and then make the script die. Okay, so this is a little bit more professional way to do it, a little more complicated. You can go your whole life with this section right here. I mean, with this connection string up here. But for now, what you can do is make sure you have a good connection, and if something breaks, like let's say I change that to rot instead of root, and I go back and I hit refresh, look at that, access denied. So instead of throwing a fatal error the way the first line did, remember this first line? When I changed the username, or I didn't have any credentials in, it threw a fatal error. I had to go to my logs. By using the try catch, I'm catching the exception and printing an error. So what you're going to start seeing also with object-oriented programming is this little signature here. And this is getting an instance or property or method of the object. So this is using the PDO exception object, which will carry the value. But you don't need to memorize this. As long as you have access to this block of code and understand what it does, you'll be in great shape. So we're trying to connect, and then we're grabbing some values. And we're saying for each one of these values from the stores as a singular row, let's output that row. Okay? So let's go back and change this back to root and look at the results of what we got. So what I have here is an array and all my values as such right here. And this is the value of stores. So basically I have selected, and I'll put the results right below here, I have selected all from the stores. And so you see store Los Angeles, 0 Los Angeles, sales 1500, 1 1500. So basically what that means is I have print row like this. Let's echo scalar row, and we'll do 0. Whoops, excuse me. I'm using the 0 instead of the actual field name because I don't have those memorized. And then I could do a break tag here. So we'll be doing selections again, but I just wanted to show it while it's up. So now I'm doing row 0, row 1. So what used to be, let's go back to localhost connection. What used to be this is now this. See that? So what I've done is taken the print R of row and just actually accessed each element of that value. So look, this nastiness, because I was just doing print R around the whole object, became this with a break tag. And now I get all my values. So that's a quick intro. But what's important here is that you understand this line. This is how you connect to the database. So as long as this file is included on your site, and as long as you have access to this line, you are connected, and you can use the rest of your abilities to call databases and manipulate the data in them.